In 1937, oil bosses built a private neighborhood by the water on a 500-acre point of land east of Houston. Nearly 400 homes, bay views, the families of the men who ran Humble Oil. Today you can paddle a kayak over those streets. Brownwood did not flood once and bounce back. It sank. About 10 feet, slowly, year after year, while the same industry pumped the ground empty beneath it. The bay walked in and never left. And here is the part that should worry the millions still living nearby. Brownwood was not the accident. It was the warning. Brownwood is gone now. What sits there today is a 500-acre park called the Baytown Nature Center, marsh and mudflat, where almost 400 houses used to stand. People walk trails for watching birds that used to be paved streets. The bay covers the rest. And the force that pulled the whole neighborhood under is not finished. It is working under a city of more than 2 million people right now, faster than it is working anywhere else in the country. In May 2025, a study in the journal Nature Cities looked at 6 years of radar from satellites across the 28 largest cities in the United States. Houston finished first, not in a good way. 42% of the city's land is dropping more than 5 millimeters a year. 12% is going down twice that fast. In the worst pockets, the ground is falling 2 inches every single year. The oil capital of America is sinking into the hole it pumped empty. Brownwood was just the first piece to go. Go back to the start. In 1937, the men who ran Humble Oil and Refining Company, the firm that would one day become Exxon, picked a point of land on the north shore of Galveston Bay and built themselves something to show off. Brownwood. Big lots, water on 3 sides, the kind of address you bought to prove you had made it. For 2 decades, it worked exactly as promised. High, dry, and quiet. Then the yards started getting wet. After Hurricane Carla came through in 1961, the people there noticed something that did not add up. The bay was reaching higher into their backyards than it used to, and it was not going back down. The water line was creeping up the lawns. It took a while to figure out why, and when they did, nobody wanted to hear it. Their neighborhood was not staying still. It was going down to meet the water. The cause was buried right beneath them. To grow, to refine, to run the plants along the Houston Ship Channel, the oil companies and the towns around them were pulling huge amounts of fresh water out of the ground. Goose Creek, Pelly, Baytown, the oil plants, all of them pulling from the same underground water, all of them pumping faster than rain could ever put it back. And as that water came out, the land above it came down. The numbers from that time are hard to believe. Between 1943 and 1973, roughly 4,700 square miles of land southeast of downtown Houston sank at least 6 inches. Near the Ship Channel and Brownwood, the drop hit about 9 feet. Over the longer record, going back to the early 1900s, a few far-off spots closer to the bay lost as much as 13 feet of height. Not in a storm, not in a season. Decade by decade, an inch and then a foot at a time, while families paid mortgages on houses that were quietly riding the ground down toward sea level. By the mid-1980s, the people measuring the land had a name for what they were looking at: a bowl of sinking land. More than 1,720 square miles of the Houston area had dropped at least a full foot. It was one of the largest bowls of sinking land in the country, a dip the size of a small state, pressed into the coast by nothing more dramatic than a lot of pumps running for a lot of years. And the deepest point of that bowl was sitting under Brownwood. But here is the detail that everyone missed at the time. Brownwood was not special. It was just early. It sat in the deepest part of the bowl, closest to the bay, so it drowned first. The same thing was happening under the whole region. Brownwood was the Canary, and the Canary was a whole neighborhood. By the late 1970s, the bay was winning. In 1979, 12 inches of rain fell on the neighborhood, and the water had nowhere to drain because the land it was supposed to drain off of had dropped below the tide. Then, in August 1983, Hurricane Alicia came ashore and finished it. The storm tore homes off their foundations. What survived was condemned. The Federal Emergency Management Agency said most of Brownwood was unfit to live in. The city started buying people out, and the streets where oil bosses once parked their boats went under for good. The buyout dragged on for years. By 1990, the rising water had already swallowed many of Brownwood's streets outright. The city of Baytown turned the drowned point of land into the nature park it is today, and some of the money to clean it up came from a group of chemical and oil companies. Read that slowly. The land that the oil industry helped sink got partly fixed up with oil industry money into a park where the only residents now are herons and the only traffic is the tide. The neighborhood the boom built, the boom unbuilt. Now zoom out, because how this works only makes sense from underground. Picture the ground beneath Houston as a stack of layers, sand and gravel that hold water, with thick beds of clay in between. The sandy layers hold the underground water, and that water is doing more than just sitting there. The push of that water is helping hold the whole thing up, keeping the grains spaced apart, holding up the clay on top. Pull the water out faster than rain refills it, and that push drops. The clay above has nothing left to lean on, so it squeezes down into the space. Think of a wet sponge holding up a book. Pull the water out of the sponge, and it flattens, and the book drops with it. Now imagine the sponge never puffs back up. That is clay. Sand can spring back a little when the water returns. Clay does not. Once it packs down, the height it gave up is gone for good. You can stop pumping tomorrow, and you do not get those inches back. The ground stays down. It helps to know what is actually in those clay beds. They are packed with tiny flakes, stacked loosely, with water filling the gaps between them. As long as the water push holds, the flakes stay spread out and the whole layer stays thick. Drop the push, and the flakes fall against each other and lock into place, like a stack of wet paper pressed flat and left to dry. That is why the loss only goes one way. Wetting a stack of dried, pressed paper again does not turn it back into a loose pile. The shape is gone. The same is true of the ground under a city, and there is no machine that can pump it back up. That is the part most people get wrong about sinking ground. They think it is like a drought, that it ends when the rain comes back. It does not. Leonard Owenhen, a research scientist at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory and the lead author of the 2025 study, has said on the record that this is exactly what makes it dangerous. He calls the sinking an invisible threat. Pulling water from the ground, he has explained, does not stop the moment you stop pumping. The land keeps settling into the empty spaces long after the wells go quiet. And in the study itself, Owenhen and his co-writers put the warning plainly. The harm hides. It builds silently under buildings and pipes and roads, and by the time the damage is clear, it is already very bad or close to a disaster. You do not see the threat, you see the result. Houston is the worst case in the country, for one simple reason. It took the most out of the ground, for the longest time, over the widest area. First oil, pumped out of the flat coastal land since the early 1900s. Then water, pumped out of the underground water beneath it to supply one of the fastest growing cities in America. Both leave a hole. The ground fills the hole the only way it can, by coming down. And of the two, the water did most of the damage. The study found that, in general, around 80% of land sinking comes down to groundwater pumping rather than oil. And in Houston, groundwater has long been the main cause. That detail matters, because it means the sinking is not a leftover from some old pumping era that already ended. It is tied right to the thing the city does every single day to stay alive. Drink, flush, water crops, run the plants. Pull the water out, and the ground keeps following it down. What the 2025 study really showed is that Houston is not alone, it is just first. The researchers found that 25 of the 28 cities they measured are sinking to some degree. That puts more than 34 million Americans, better than 1 in 10 people in the country, living on land that is dropping under them. Even Dallas and Fort Worth, hundreds of miles inland with no coast to worry about, are going down across nearly 98% of their city area. Houston is simply the place where it started earliest and has gone the furthest. So, who is in the bowl now? The fallout runs outward from the bay, and it grows. First, the neighborhoods at the edge, the Brownwoods of the region. The clearest loss after Brownwood was the San Jacinto battlefield, the place where Texas won its freedom in 1836. By 1974, the sinking had flooded more than 100 acres of that historic ground for good, with damages running into the millions. A monument to the founding of Texas, going under because the state pumped the water out from beneath it. Second, the suburbs. And this is the part the 2025 study did not even fully catch. When the Houston Chronicle followed up that November, reporters pointed out that the satellite data had left out some of the fastest sinking land in the whole region, the fast-growing suburbs to the north and west. That is exactly where the growth is. The towns pushing out towards Spring, Katy, the Woodlands, Conroe, places that were rice fields and pasture a generation ago and are now neighborhoods as far as the eye can see. New rooftops, new lawns, new wells, all of it pulling groundwater out of ground that had never been pumped hard before. The center of the sinking has been moving for decades, away from the old ship channel bowl and toward the places where Houston is building right now. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains the whole future of the problem. The people moving into brand new homes north and west of the city are moving onto some of the most actively dropping ground in the United States. The neighborhood sold as the safe, dry, modern choice instead of the city that floods are sitting on the front edge of the exact same thing that ate Brownwood. Most of them have no idea. Third, the bones of the city itself. Sinking rarely pulls everything down evenly, and the uneven part is what does the damage. When one corner of a foundation drops faster than another, the slab cracks. Doors stop closing. Floors tilt. Underground pipes, made to bend a little, get pushed past the little they can take, and they break. Roads buckle. Fire hydrants start sticking up higher than they used to because the ground around them dropped. These are the early signs the researchers tell people to watch for, and across wide stretches of Houston they are already showing up, one cracked wall at a time. And somehow, it gets worse, because none of those failures look like sinking ground. A homeowner sees a cracked wall and blames the foundation. A city crew patches a buckled road and moves on. A water main breaks and gets fixed. Each one looks like a single repair problem. Stack thousands of them across a city, and the real cause stays invisible, exactly the way the study warned it would, hiding inside the everyday wear and tear of a big city until something major gives way. Fourth, the water. Houston floods? Everyone knows Houston floods. But sinking ground quietly makes every flood worse. When land sinks, it does not sink in a tidy sheet. It warps. It makes new low spots where water collects and changes the paths that drainage was built to follow. Researchers believe the sinking made the flooding during Hurricane Harvey in 2017 worse than it would have otherwise been by changing where the water went and trapping it in places that used to drain. Every foot the ground loses is a foot of flood protection the city loses with it. And the city's flood defenses were built for a map that no longer exists. The channels, the drainage ponds, the storm sewers, all of it was built for heights measured years or decades ago. As the ground settles unevenly underneath that system, water that was supposed to run one direction starts pooling in another. A neighborhood that drained fine in the 1990s can sit in standing water today, not because the rain got worse, but because the land quietly tilted out from under the plan. You cannot remeasure and rebuild a whole city fast enough to keep up with ground that is still moving. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover the ground and the systems under American cities every week, with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on under your feet. Pull the lens back even wider, because the real stakes are not in any single neighborhood. Houston sits on the coast, barely above sea level to begin with. The Gulf is rising, the land is falling. Those two trends are racing toward each other from opposite directions, and the gap between them is the only thing keeping the bay out of the streets. Brownwood is what it looks like when that gap closes. A neighborhood that was high and dry, then level with the tide, then under it. The difference between Brownwood and the rest of the coast is timing, not kind. And the worst hit places over the years were Pasadena, Baytown, Texas City, Kemah, Galveston, the working towns strung along the bay. The land near the ship channel lost up to 9.5 feet at the center of the bowl. That is not a number you can shrug off. That is a region that physically lowered itself by the height of a basketball hoop. And it is the same stretch of coast that handles a huge share of the nation's refining and shipping, sitting lower against the water every year it keeps pumping. Here is the strange twist in this story, though. Houston already proved it can be stopped. It just stopped doing the thing that worked. In 1975, Texas lawmakers created the Harris-Galveston Subsidence District. It was the first agency of its kind anywhere in the United States, built with one job: to limit how much groundwater could be pulled out of the ground and to stop the sinking. They started with the worst of it. They ordered the industries along the Houston Ship Channel to quit pumping groundwater and switch to surface water from rivers and reservoirs instead, and it worked. In the Baytown and Pasadena area, the same ground that had dropped 9 feet largely stopped moving. The sinking near the channel was, for the most part, halted. Then the district turned to the rest of Harris County, telling the water districts and the cities in the north and west that they too had to switch, that most of their water had to come from the surface, not from underground. That is the rule Houston has been slowly and at great cost living under for decades. Build the pipelines, build the treatment plants, get off the groundwater, and the sinking eases. So the playbook exists. The proof exists. Stop pumping a place, and that place mostly stops dropping. The catch is the word mostly and the word stop. The clay that already packed down is not coming back. And the parts of the region that are still pumping, the booming suburbs to the north and west, are still going down. You can save the ground you have not lost yet. You cannot unsink what already sank. There is a quieter problem hiding inside the fix, too. Getting a fast-growing region off groundwater means building pipelines and treatment plants to move surface water in from rivers and reservoirs, and that takes years and billions of dollars to finish. The wells keep running until the pipes arrive. So in the exact areas where Houston is growing fastest, the need for water is climbing, while the systems to replace the wells are still being built. The sinking does not pause to wait for the fix to catch up, which is what makes the 2025 numbers so uncomfortable. Decades after the Subsidence district was created, decades into the switch to surface water, Houston is still the fastest sinking major city in the country. The rule slowed the bleed. It did not close the wound. And the front line has simply moved to wherever the new wells are. So the questions stack up, and most of them do not have clean answers yet. How far can the bowl spread before the suburbs being built today end up where Brownwood ended up? How do you protect a city against a threat that, in O'Henhen's words, you cannot see until the damage is already bad? What happens when the rising bay and the falling land finally meet along a stretch of coast that millions of people now call home? And how do you tell someone who just signed a 30-year mortgage on a new house north of the city that the ground under it is quietly dropping toward the underground water that built it? Nobody can give you the year. The data does not say when the next Brownwood goes under, or where, only that the thing running underneath it never actually stopped. It just got quieter and moved. East of Houston tonight, the Baytown Nature Center is dark and still. The trails that used to be streets run down to the waterline and disappear under it. Out past the marsh grass, the bay is sitting exactly where almost 400 homes used to be, lapping at the edge of where the next lot would have started. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. And a little further inland, under the new neighborhoods and the wide, bright highways, the ground is still going down to meet it.